joined by the Paymaster General, John Glen. Good to see you. Thanks for taking the time. Infected blood. Do you agree with the former Health Secretary, Andy Burnham, that those responsible for this travesty should be in jail?
Well, what I agree with is that the inquiry's report needs to be heard today. I think Sir Brian Langstaff has done a fantastic piece of work over 6 years to thoroughly examine all the issues. When it's published at 12:30, I haven't read it yet, we will need to examine it very carefully and look at the implications of it. I've seen lots of speculations from lots of journalists and politicians, but let's respect Sir Brian Langstaff for the work he's done, look at that report and then respond appropriately.
Will you accept his findings in full?
We will need to look at the report, but I think there's a great understanding in government that what's happened shouldn't have happened. I have met with the communities over the last 4 weeks. I've met in one-to-one meetings with them, heard about the distress and horrendous lives that they've had that have been severely damaged by what they've experienced. And we've accepted the moral case for compensation. We've legislated to set up a body to give compensation. But today is about Sir Brian Langstaff's report. And one of the things that they said in those 18 meetings I had around the United Kingdom was we don't want the government talking about compensation today. This is our day. This is a day for the inquiry's report.
Why would you not accept his findings in full?
Well, we may well do, but I think it would be better wouldn't it be normal to receive the report?
You say that it's taken 6 years for him to get to this far, that, if I may just finish, you would accept this gentleman's findings in full?
I think you'd probably wait for the report to be published and read it before you make a judgment on whether to accept it or not. I think that's a reasonable position to have, but I think it's very likely that his work will have a lot of authority and government will need to respond to it, yes.
Will there be an apology forthcoming?
We will respond in the appropriate way. I mean,
and
it's
what
important.
Does that mean? What does that mean?
Well, you know,
thousands of people have died, tens of thousands of people were infected. It's taken 50 years. An apology is not too much to ask for, surely.
But it's also important that we respect the conventions that we have with respect to reporting to the report to the House of Commons in due course. But let me just say what we have done. We've legislated to set up a body for compensation. You know, I've engaged experts over the last 3 months to advise how to translate Brian Langstaff's recommendations to use Robert Francis's study into an effective compensation scheme. And in very short order, I'll be able to make an announcement on that.
Using a lot of political speak this morning, Minister.
I'm trying to explain a very complex situation.
And I understand.
And I'm trying to also respect my responsibilities as a government minister.
Yeah, what's the scope of compensation going to be?
Well, we've accepted the moral case. We've been seeking to translate the recommendations of Brian Langstaff and Robert Francis, who did a study into how we would translate those recommendations. Obviously, people who've suffered with different diseases, with different intensity, acute and chronic conditions, and been working with a group of about a dozen experts to advise us on what are the clinical markers for those, and across 5 different heads of loss. And these are the things that we've been looking at.
Will the compensation be fulsome?
When I announce it, will be for others to evaluate. But I've tried to translate the work of the recommendations and the studies into a set of recommendations that meet expectations.
What do you want to say to the families that are caught up in this absolute scandal for the last part of half a century?
Well, what I want to say to them is that we today will be taking the report of Sir Brian Langstaff very seriously. It's a serious piece of work. We want the focus to be on that, and we recognise that what has happened should never have happened, and the government regrets very much that successive governments have not dealt with this early enough.
So you won't tell me what the Prime Minister's going to say. Would you like to apologise?
I have apologised to the groups individually. Well, I think it's right for the Prime Minister on this day. I think people want to hear from the Prime Minister and for him to address that.
But you're sat in front of me this morning, Minister. I'm asking you, Mr Glen, whether you want to apologise for this travesty.
Well, what has happened should never have happened.
That's not an apology.
I've apologised to the groups, and I think people will want to see the inquiry's report today. The representatives of these communities asked us to focus on the inquiry's report.
And if I were to press you a third time for an apology, would you be forthcoming then?
Well, I think the government will respond very fully in a few hours' time. OK.
Rishi Sunak and his wife earned an extra £1/3 million a day last year, an extra £1/3 a day. Let's just let that land. That according to the Times Rich list. Tell me how he can relate to a single mum in Wigan who's struggling to keep a roof over her head.
Well, I think Rishi Sunak needs to be judged on what decisions he's made as a government minister. And I was sat with him in the Treasury during COVID, where he, within a matter of days, set up the process for furlough scheme, for bounce back loans, for additional money for our public services. I know Rishi Sunak very well. I interviewed him 10 years ago to be a Member of Parliament. He had a successful career before he entered Parliament. And he fell in love with somebody whose father had set up a very successful IT services firm. What he needs to be judged on as Prime Minister is what he delivers for the people of this country. And when we came out of the situation with COVID in early 2022, and we were facing a war in Ukraine, and we saw energy prices going very high very quickly, he intervened to provide support for the poorest people in this country, as he's done at every fiscal event that he's been in government.
He's richer than the king.
But it's for others to comment on that. That's a private matter. I've explained that he had a successful career before he entered Parliament, and a lot of his wealth isn't due to him personally. But I can say that when I've been working with him in government, his focus has been delivering for the most vulnerable in difficult times, even in once-in-a-century events like what happened with
If that
COVID.
were the case, why is he so unpopular with the electorate?
Well, polls go up and down. What's important is that he does the right thing for the long term.
20-point difference.
The Prime Minister does the right thing in the long-term interest of this country.
The unelected Prime Minister.
If you look at the growth rate in the first quarter of this year, it's higher than many expected.
So why
and
is he
higher
so
than most of
unpopular
it.
then?
Well, as I say, sometimes in politics you need to do the right things in difficult circumstances.
Yeah, you also need to win an election, and you can't do that if you're 20 points behind.
We can rely on the Prime Minister to do the right thing in the long-term interests of this country, and I'm very proud to serve in his government.
Even if it costs him the election?
Well, we'll see.
We will. What can you tell us about this new agreement with Finland?
I'm not familiar with it. It's not something that...
OK, it was the trail that you... Apparently that's what you were here to talk about this morning.
No, I was here to talk about infected blood, because I'm the Minister for infected blood. I think that's what people expect.
OK, maybe we speak to your PR team. A word on Iran's president before I let you go.
Well, obviously, the news of his apparent death is only broken in the last hour, and we'll be monitoring, the Foreign Office will be monitoring that situation very carefully. I haven't anything more to say on that at this point.
OK, it's good to see you, Minister. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot.